If everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority. So you can't have 10 core values.
Fire, earth, wind, water. This is the Elemental Educator. And now your host, Tyler Como.
Hello and welcome to the Elemental Educator podcast. I'm your host, Tyler, and today we have a special guest ready to empower you. Ashley Moore is a principal of an elementary/middle school in Maryland. Her leadership journey began with her teaching career in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, covering grades 3 through 12, serving as a general and special education teacher. After serving as a teacher, Moore entered the administrative realm as an assistant principal. Her experiences included general, special education, and specialized programming. As an administrator, she has implemented a school-wide program such as accelerated learning, gifted and talented, arts integration, and STEM. Moore's diverse experiences has also led her to national certification as a principal mentor, committed to her personal mission of doing what's best for kids, and the belief that all students can learn and achieve. She looks forward to utilizing her skills to assist others with their leadership journey, and I really look forward to unpacking her earth element with her. Welcome to the Elemental Educator podcast, Ashley. It is a pleasure to have you here.
Oh, thank you for having me, Tyler. I really appreciate you reaching out.
Absolutely. The pleasure is all mine. Now, even just reading your introduction here, I'm excited to unpack some things with you, and we get to see a little bit of your journey, but I'm curious, what sparked you to kick this off? Where did you first get into education?
So as long as I've been able to work, I've been working with children. So it started at church. I was at the type of family, I was a part of the type of family where we were at church probably 5 to 7 days out of the 7-day week. And so I was heavily involved with youth programs, Sunday school, things like that. And then when I became a camp counselor, I decided I want to work with special needs children because I was assigned a certain student who had special needs, and I had never worked with a child in that capacity before. And it was something that really spoke to me, and this is what you're supposed to do. So when I went to Temple University for my undergrad, I got my bachelor's in dual certification in elementary and special education.
Wow. And that's very clearly rooted in your personal mission of doing what's best for kids. And Ashley,
Yes.
Earth represents our core values, and it's that root that you put yourself in with your beliefs. Can you just reflect for us on these foundational values that guided your leadership journey and how they shaped your approach as a principal?
Sure. So my core values are integrity and fun. So those are the two things that I tell people, and those are the two things that you usually see about me up front. I believe that as a leader, you have to be transparent, you have to be honest, and you have to have the highest level of integrity because people have to trust you to lead in this type of capacity and at this level. And so if you don't have integrity, then I feel like you lose all credibility as a leader. And then fun, because why not? This work is hard and certain people are called to do it. And I think you have to bring a level of fun to the work in order for it to be enjoyable for not just you, but for everyone around you and who you lead.
Because why not? And
Because why not?
because I love that. Now, thinking of these values of integrity and fun, and even just your general mission of what's best for kids, your experiences with accelerated learning and arts integration, how are you ensuring that these programs you're doing have alignment with those core values of not just your core values, but your school
Mhm.
community's core values?
So our school community's core values are growth, excellence, creativity, to name a few, safety. So what we do and what I have been using, at least for the last couple of years, I've been using like an architectural alignment. It's from Robin Jackson's Buildership University. And so basically, whenever we want to do a new initiative, we look at, does this help us stay true to our identity, our impact, and who we are as a school. And so looking at our mission, our vision, and our core values is like our North Star. So I also use that as a way to empower our teachers to be able to come up with ideas and then evaluate, does this align with everything that we do or who we say we are as a school. So whenever looking at programming, that's what we use first. Is this aligned to our vision, our mission, and our core values? Are we staying true to who we are? Are we staying true to who we want to impact? Not even if it's possible, because one of the things I always say from Walt Disney, it's always fun to do what is impossible. And this work is somewhat of an impossible job. I say that all the time, but it's always fun to see what happens when you actually try, think outside the box, and just do it. Just try it. And for example, in my particular school right now, I have a poverty rate of over 70%, which is really high. So when I said I wanted to make my entire middle school an honors middle school, everybody looked at me like I was crazy, right? They're like, more, but there's this challenge, there's this challenge, there's this challenge. And I'm like, okay, so what can we do to overcome those challenges? We know that challenges exist. So how do we make sure that we put some fail safes in place so that when we experience and incur those challenges, we can overcome them because everybody here is capable. So looking at it from that lens of one, giving people that agency and that empowerment to have a hand in the work and to really help cultivate their ideas, but then also challenging them and pushing them and saying, even though there's going to be challenges and obstacles, we can do it. You can do it. Everybody has the ability. We're all professionals. You're all very well educated, and we can do this work if we take a team approach to it.
Absolutely. It's the empowerment piece behind it. And
Hmm.
we'll unpack this when we talk a little bit about the water element and the fire element as we talk about decision making and change process that we start to put into
Yep.
play here. But you've already alluded to the fact that your core values, your earth, that root, it's driving your decision making process. And you need to do it with intention. You need to, when you're
Hmm.
making decisions, align it with your values because that's how you get buy in. That's how you get power. That's how you can start that
Absolutely.
movement. Now, with that, your mission of doing what's best for kids, it's a very strong value statement. Now, we hear this all the time. You have to do what's best for kids. You have to do what's best for kids. Can you share a specific instance where this value actually led you through a difficult process and a decision you had to make?
Oh, all the time. To tack on to the doing what's best for kids, we do what's best for kids, but I don't do what's always best for me or what benefits me necessarily because at the heart of it all, it's all about kids. And so, just one example in the school, I've been at the same school that I'm going into my 8th year at this school. And even throughout the pandemic and leading the school, I have made the conscious choice to be a solo administrator. Reason being, budget. And so my goal was to make certain that when we were growing the school that we had all of the highly qualified educators that needed to be in front of children providing instruction as opposed to me having more help in the office, so to speak. So I took on a little more in terms of my workload in order to make sure that students had access to very unique experiences. For example, through our programming at our school, we've grown our arts programs so students can take dance, they can take theater, they can take visual art, they can take technology, they can take music, vocal or instrumental. These are all things that were grown over time and that I had to make room for in our budget and say, listen, I need an assistant principal. I know I do, but I want to make sure that the kids have what they need first before I look to administrative needs or anything of that nature. But that's just one, and that's pretty difficult because I told you earlier I have 9-year-old twin boys, and when I first started the school, they were 3. Making that type of decision early on and knowing that there's going to be late nights, there's going to be a very heavy workload was a lot for my family and myself. It ended up all working out in the end. So now we know we have a really collective approach to school. So, for example, my husband, he volunteers at the school frequently. My in-laws are at the school frequently. My children attend my school. That challenge really helped us come together as a family, and we really are rooted in our school community, like very deeply.
And that story resonates with me so much, Ashley, because I'm also a principal with no vice principal in my building. The proactive steps, putting the kids first and doing what's best for them, pushing aside your own agenda and make sure you're pushing the agenda of the kids, it actually made my job a lot easier. I'm doing different things.
Hmm.
Sure, I have to teach a little bit as well. Sure, I'm floating a bit more and I'm doing more. I'm more active with the students than a principal that maybe has a larger school and a couple of administrators under their belt. Boy, do I ever I see so much growth in my community. I see so much growth in my student behavior, and they are powerful people, and when you give them the tools to shine, they're going to find a way to shine through, and that's exactly what you're creating with that. Now, With that process, though, there is adversity that comes along the way. And then we start to transition from that earth element of how our values guide us to how our values need to
Mm-hmm.
help us when we're dealing with adversity. So, with this, can you share a significant challenge that you faced in your leadership role and how you leaned on your values to navigate through it?
Oh my goodness. Yes. We all have led, I don't know if you sure how long you've been leading, but leading through the pandemic was probably the most challenging thing I've ever encountered in my life. Not just on a personal level, but on a professional level. Because we were in the process of growing our school through the pandemic. We had gotten this big grant from our state to expand our enrollment. So we were in the process of expanding our enrollment. Things were going well throughout the pandemic. And then we came back to school into the 21-22 school year. And we had grown, I think, an additional 50 to 75 students in that time period. And so while that may not seem like that's a lot, that means that there was more staff, there was more to manage. And so it became really difficult with the challenges of COVID-19 and the guidelines and things of that nature. So it got to a point at the 21-22 school year, at the end of it, I really strongly questioned if I should continue to be a principal. The one thing that I always say is that the moment that I feel like I'm become a harm and I'm not able to do what's best for kids is the moment that I need to step away. And so I had to really ask myself, dig deep, reflect, and say, am I still able to do what's best for kids in this moment? Am I still able to continue and rebuild, essentially? Because that's what had to happen. There was a rebuilding that had to take place. And so that took about a few months of soul searching to try to figure that out and think about what my personal mission was. And I said, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to stay for my community and make sure that however the building is, whenever I decide to leave it, it's the best that it's ever been. And that is one time where it was really challenging. There were so many challenges. And of course, you see these things in the news, you see them on social media, but it's very real. Not having teachers, not having substitutes, having to cover classes. I'm not sure what the COVID-19 guidelines were like when you were at your school. They were really strenuous. We had weekly testing that occurred. And then based on the results of that weekly testing, we would have kids home. We were in and out of hybrid learning, in-person learning, virtual learning. It was the constant change of having to deal with all these changes and not having a constant at any point in the school year really wore on me and my mental health. And so I really had to have that soul searching moment and say, am I still doing what's best for kids? And can I continue to do what's best for kids in the midst of having all these challenges? So that was one really difficult time because if anybody will tell you, I love my job. As crazy as it may sound, I love being a principal. I love being in leadership. And so, and it's the most difficult job I feel like most people could ever have. And I can't see myself doing anything different. So for me to have that moment really brought forth the challenges that came with COVID-19 and came with the pandemic that I just could not even have fathomed that I would experience.
And I'm not surprised that you persevered through that time, given your core values of integrity and fun. You stayed true to yourself, and you love what you do. You said it yourself. And your personal mission of what's best for kids, your greatest impact zone. I loved being a teacher because I could impact my class. But when I got into administration, I could start to impact my school. And I'm hoping that through what we're
Mm-hmm.
doing here and the messages we're putting out, we start to impact a much larger community. And what that community looks like yet, I have no idea. But I'm not shocked that you were able to persevere and stay where you are now because you went through that adversity rooted in something very powerful and you stuck to your values as the soul searching and everything. It brought you a little bit of grit to get you through that hard time. Now,
Mm-hmm.
aside from the personal agenda there, though, as an assistant principal and now principal, you've worked in various educational environments. What strategies have you found to be most effective in overcoming unique challenges of just education settings in general?
So I think just in the different environments, one, just being adaptive and sometimes taking a step back and looking at what's happening and looking at that bigger picture and then understanding what the goals are and what we are trying to achieve. and then moving forward from there. But what I believe is one of my biggest strengths is always taking a team approach to most challenges. I don't try to sit in my office and figure everything out, because I always tell people the answer that we seek is somewhere in this room, and it doesn't always have to come from me. And so I tell my staff that quite frequently. So when navigating general and special education challenges, one, I try to get all of my teachers to understand that good teaching, you'll reach all of your students. Is there there are some practices we talk about universal design for learning. And if we utilize those practices everywhere, then a lot of times we can meet some of the special education students' needs, and it makes it easier for the special education teacher with collaboration. So having those specific strategies embedded in our daily practice has really been a game changer. And that is something that I had to learn and navigate just as a teacher, because I realized the skill set that I had and that I brought to the table, not every teacher has. And it's just because they just have never learned it before, they've never been taught. And so when I would collaborate with my general education teachers as a teacher, I would teach them about a specific strategy. This is how we can approach this. And then what I did is that we filled our code teaching toolkit together. So when we would come together and collaborate, all right, we have to read this really complex text. Let's do the chunking of the text. Let's do this. And so it became really easy, should I say, to collaborate and then plan to address the student needs. But once again, that takes a team approach, understanding that you have a wealth of knowledge, I have a wealth of knowledge. Let's come together and be able to address this problem collectively, as opposed to each of us trying to individually solve an issue when we can solve that issue together.
And I love that you share examples of what collaboration looks like, because it is a word, it's a buzzword that's used a lot in education. You have to collaborate, you have to work together, you have to be a team. But not a lot of people know what that actually means and what that looks like, and what it can be, and that it really doesn't have limits. It links back to your value of integrity. When you're sticking to that value, you have transparency, you have fluidity in your communication. Now, for the people listening to this episode, your story is so rooted in this value. What would be the first actionable item? What's the first way that somebody who maybe doesn't know what their values are yet can start to hone in on them?
So I love Brene Brown. That's my friend in my head. And so she just I want to say she wrote this book in like the last 4 years, Dare to Lead. And in Dare to Lead, there's like about 2 or 3 chapters just about core values, about what core values are, how you identify your core values, and then how you operationalize them in your daily work. And so that's a great place to start, because not only does she have the book, she has a wealth of resources. And so you can go there and do the core values exercise. And I actually got a new assistant principal. We actually did this together, and so that he can identify what his core values are. And so basically it's really hard, because you have to soul search. So you have to look at, okay, what resonates deeply with me? And then you have to go back and you have to whittle it down and whittle it down, because if everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority. So you can't have 10 core values. You have to have a specific set. Most people say between 2 and 5 is the most appropriate. But you have to really look at who I am, what I'm about, and that takes a lot of reflection and vulnerability and honesty in what it is that you do every day, and a higher level of emotional intelligence and self-awareness, which are really important in leadership, and really being honest about who you are and what you do. But I think that's a great resource and a place to start when you want to identify your core values. It literally takes you step by step. And the resources on her website are free. We all love free.
We all love free. Dare to Lead. I love that. And the message is very similar to one of my previous guests at Kosh, who talked about when you're finding values, you start with 7, narrow it down to 5, see where you can go from there. A very powerful message behind that. But he talked a lot as well about when you're searching for your value, you need to take away the things that keep you busy. Take away teaching, take away if you exercise, take away all of the external factors, and just look at your core. Once you remove all of that, who are you? Who are you on Sundays? What do you believe in on Sundays? What does that look like? That's where you're going to find your values. Now, Ashley, water starts to represent the ability to implement change, where we segue
Mhm.
from air of being faced with adversity, we need to respond to it with something. We need to unfreeze, make a change, and refreeze again. So, how have you successfully driven this meaningful change in your schools? And what
Mhm.
lessons might you have learned along the way?
So when I talk about taking a team approach, I used to take on the brunt of the work in terms of the thinking and the implementation, and quickly led to burnout. But then it also led to people feeling underutilized and not necessarily their strengths being valued and recognized. So that was the lesson, learning how to use the people around you through some missteps in leadership, and thinking that I'm the leader, I'm the one that has to take everything on, and I have to do I. That was the problem. And so when transitioning to, we need to solve this problem, we need to look at it collectively, and then I was able to really hone in and understand the strengths of the people around me, and ultimately the work being shared meant that people were able to take ownership of that work, then speak to the work that's happening to other people, being those spokesmen or those spokeswomen to other people in the building, and be able to just to share in the work. It really opened up a wealth of opportunity and doors, because then that freed me up to do other things. But one of the biggest things in terms of change, I want to say one of the biggest changes that we've made in the current role that I'm in the current school that I'm in, is transitioning our school from secretly being advanced academics to actually being recognized, like through our district and things like that, with having advanced academics and gifted and talented. It was something that teachers did in their classrooms, like they would address the needs of our advanced learners. And I was like, we need a program for it. And it, once again, it's more, this is too much, or this is a lot. And I'm like, yeah, it is. But look at who we're not serving when we don't have these things available for them. It's great that we have intervention. It's great that we have regular instruction. But what about our students that need to be enriched? What about them? And once again, doing what's best for kids, not just some of the kids, but all of them. We've been able to press on and fully implement having an honors courses in middle school, but now becoming all honors in middle school. Before it was just a track. And then we realized with just that track, then our kids who could potentially have an opportunity to be in the track could not. So it was like, no matter what, we were leaving kids out. And so we were like, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that anymore. We're going to challenge ourselves to be able to make the most rigorous content accessible to all of our kids, no matter what that takes. And so it took a lot of thought partnering and figuring out what our fail safes are, what our green flags were, what our red flags were in terms of experiencing different challenges with the students and implementation, how we would utilize the people, our support staff in the building to help bridge gaps for certain students to make that content accessible. It just took a lot of planning, and it took a lot of collective effort from the teaching staff, because ultimately they're the ones that really have to implement it. I can plan all day long and provide the materials and resources, but it's up to them to really implement it. And so that was one of the biggest challenges that we had in terms of implementing a huge change. And really taking that team approach really helped. It had a significant impact.
And what's awesome about that story is you touch on all of the elements almost ubiquitously throughout. You you mention the change that you had to take, but then you instantly
Mhm.
said this change got so rooted in our core value of the agenda on what's best for kids. And yeah, of course we faced that adversity. I love that story. That's a great story. Now, with that, you
Mhm.
also take on that role of principal mentor. So how do you
Mhm.
guide these new leaders that are trying to do these incredible things that you're doing? How do you ensure that new leaders are staying aligned with their core values, their vision, while still maintaining stability in their schools?
One thing that they teach us in the principal mentor course, and it's through the National Association of Elementary School Principals, is the push and pull method. Pushing whenever there's a push that needs to happen, meaning that you need to tell somebody what to do, versus maybe questioning and leading them along the way. And so, what I like to do, and that's just with teachers, I am a reflective practitioner. So, what I will often do is I will ask questions that cause deep reflection and that require deep reflection for them to arrive at the answer that's best for them. I very rarely will say, this is what you need to do, unless you're asking me very pointedly. I need to know exactly what to do. But if it's something like you're not really sure on how to move forward, I always ask those key questions. Who does this benefit? If you do this, what do you think the outcomes will be? What do you think the pushback is going to be? Because you're always going to get pushback on no matter what it is that you do. What's the pushback? Is the pushback going to be something that you can, how are you going to be able to substantiate this change or this idea to all of your stakeholders, not just your teachers, but your parents, your board, if you answer to one, your supervisors, the kids. So that's what I try to do when I talk to my friends and my people that I mentor, officially and unofficially, because that sometimes happens. Yeah. And I think just using that method is really helpful. It's just like my go-to. It's like my mentor toolbox, and talking them through situations as opposed to just telling them what to do, because ultimately they have to be able to navigate these things on their own. And one of the things that you want to do as a mentor is be able to provide them with the tools and the wherewithal and the knowledge and expertise so that they can then take that information and use it on their own. So that's one of the ways.
When you do that, you actually
Mhm.
shift from dictatorship to facilitator, and
Mhm.
you become a coach. And when you start to listen to the people, you start to again further understand what they need. And in
Mhm.
doing that, you can start to see where their values are and how they need to have interventions put in place, coaching put in place, some sort of strategy put in place to realign to help you move forward.
Yep.
So, again, that's a very powerful statement. And for alchemists listening, if you're that aspiring leader, really think, go back. What are you valuing? Why did you
Mhm.
get into what you're getting into? Is it to boss people around, or is it to be there and support and push a better cause? What's your personal agenda, and whose agenda are you trying to push? Now, these shouldn't be bold statements, but they can be. And some of the decisions that we have to make
Mhm.
when we push the kids' agenda, they are bold. So, Ashley, we start to transition to play with the fire element, which is our risk taking and our decision making process. What's been one of the riskiest decisions you've made? And not so much the outcome, but what
Mhm.
helped guide you through that decision making process?
I feel like some of the things that I do are most people would consider to be risky, and I'm just like, it's Tuesday. In leadership and in education, there's a risk associated with a lot of different things. But I will say, just thinking about like specialized programming and the implementation of specialized programming,
Yes.
um, yeah, like I feel like sometimes that can be risky, especially with the honors. Like making the middle school all honors it was a really big deal, only because based on the criteria that the district has and that type of the red tape is technically not supposed to happen. It's not supposed to be a thing. And I said, you know what? We're gonna do it. This is something that we're going to stick to, what it is that we know that's once again best for kids and so our core values. And we're just going to move forward and do it. And then a lot of times with risk, especially in leadership, I don't know if I should say this, there are going to be times where you're going to break rules. And but you have to be prepared to say, if I broke these rules, then um it was for a positive outcome, or if it was for this particular cause, which is doing best for children, I think that is worth the risk, right? But just thinking about like the specialized programming, the honors courses was one thing. Offering more arts courses was another thing, because we've been slowly moving to performing and visual arts as well, as a school. Our core focus has been arts integration, but our biggest goal is to become performing and visual arts, which these are programs that typically they don't exist anywhere. And so when you're taking that risk, you don't have a model to go off of. You don't have an exemplar. So what you have to do is you have to find those pockets of excellence in different places and try to replicate them as best as you can, or create that criteria for excellence and to just go for it. So I think that's what makes it risky sometimes, is that when you're doing things that nobody's ever done before and you're really going on a new frontier, is really creating what those standards of excellence are going to be, and what are those goals that we're going to reach, and how, and clear steps on how we're going to get there. I think when you have that level of clarity, it creates a level of comfort for those people who are also taking the risk with you, because sometimes they're like, I don't know if I should be doing X, Y, and Z, or it creates very little opportunity for uncertainty or pauses for concern. So I
You're
think this was a
absolutely right.
special,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, and it's so powerful because any change in education has been a risk and people
Hmm.
are scared of it. And don't get me wrong, there are some bad decisions that can be made around education. And it makes
Hmm.
sense to consider them risks because you are impacting the lives of so many generations that could be coming up from the decisions that you make.
Yes.
But you're absolutely spot on that there are decisions that just get taken as risks, and risks actually just has a bad connotation. It's just something different.
Hmm.
And overcoming
Hmm.
it, having that strong root, having that strong connection, it's so important. And you hit it head on here where you said sometimes you're going to break the rules. And one of the best conversations that I've had on these episodes so far was a person who said, our superintendent told us that you are going to disagree with some of the things I ask you to do and you won't do them.
Hmm.
And I need you to
Hmm.
know that's okay because I hired you to do what's best and make your judgment.
Mm,
And that's a high level of trust that you're creating.
it
And
is.
it makes those risks seem a little bit less scary. And what it actually leads
Hmm.
to is more effective programming. Like the risks that you're taking in your school with the extensive programming you're adding, they are so beneficial for kids, but they were
Hmm.
probably scary when they first started. Now, with that though, you have some diverse experience from Philadelphia to Maryland, and you'll have to approach your decision making in these risks with that need of balancing the shiny thing that you just want to get started versus the longevity plan of the school. How do you
Hmm.
find that balance?
Focusing on one thing at a time. And I say this now as somebody who has been doing this for a little while, but that wasn't always the case. But just taking one step at a time is the most logical thing to do. And also, it makes more sense for your team. It creates less chaos and confusion for your team. People feel more secure implementing whatever it is that you want to implement, because they feel more competent, they feel more confident in it. I was trying to do all these initiatives all at once. And then I believe I had to take a step back after a few years because we had so many priorities that there weren't any. And so we all had to take a step back and reflect and say, okay, we're going to focus on this one thing for this finite amount of time before we add in something else, and before we add in something else. I think that is the best way to balance it, because once again, you get to be able to just implement so many things over a longer period of time than you would if you tried to approach 5 or 6 different things within a year. For example, over time, every year we pick a focus. And so last year our focus was writing. And so people were like, well, writing, that's not enough. Like, we need something else. No, because we can write in science and social study. Like, we can write in every single content area. And in order for our students to be able to think critically about what it is that they're doing, they can write about it. And so I said, we're actually honing on a lot of different skills just by focusing on getting our students to write more, and then write up and to write about their diverse experiences and what they've learned in their different courses. And so one thing that we noticed throughout this school year is that the writing got really great. We had first graders, they were writing like they were third graders. It was a really, it was like one of the best decisions that we made. And we're going to continue it. It's not like we're going to stop. And we're going to continue to implement writing because we're seeing the growth from it. Are the students where we want them to be exactly? No, they aren't. But by us focusing on that for this last school year, we know what the missteps were. We've become more confident in what it is that we're doing. And for the new people who are coming along, we'll be able to share those resources, and people will be able to unofficially like mentor those newcomers to our staff. So I think that just focusing on one thing at a time is the best way to approach it. And as far as just going from like place to place, because my whole story is unique, but to me the schoolhouse is the schoolhouse. And once again, if you stay true to your core values and who you are and what your personal mission is, and aligning that to your schools, then you'll be able to achieve whatever you want.
What a great message to end that with there. And a really powerful statement too about not doing too much.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much to be said about the idea of staying in your lane. It's not impressive to me if you're a grade 2 teacher pushing grade 4 or 5 content on kids. How well are
Mm-hmm.
you pushing the grade 2 content? How well are you pushing, and how deep are you going with it? And what are they able to do with it? Now, through that, you'll see them do skills at grade 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 levels, but you need to
Right.
stay in your lane and push. There's no pride in saying, I'm teaching these kids 3 grade levels above what they're supposed to be doing. Go
Mm-hmm.
deep into what you're supposed to do. Go
Right.
deep. It's there for a reason. Now, on top of all of this, you had an opportunity to do something really cool and present at the National Principals Conference. Can you share what that experience was like?
Sure. So earlier, I've spoken to you about how it's one of my personal goals this year is to work on speaking publicly, not just on social media, on podcasts, or at different conferences and things of that nature. So I recently presented at the National Association for Elementary School Principals and Secondary Principals Conference. It was a joint conference this year. And initially, I submitted 2 proposals to speak, and neither one of them were accepted. And so I just took that as, okay, that's my fate. It's not supposed to happen this time. One of my principals, I call my principal, she's one of my principals. She called me probably 3 weeks before the conference and said, she just got on the phone. She said, hey, we're all going to do this joint presentation together. You're not telling me no. You're going to do it. And she's like, it's about student leadership and agency. I know you'll be great. Here, I need your email address so that we can get the ball rolling and get you in contact with all the other people who are presenting. And I said, okay. So it's called a boom session. So you're supposed to speak about a particular topic for 7 minutes. And then the idea is that there's a big idea or a mic drop at the end of each person's turn. So there were 6 of us. I had never spoken in a room that large before. I think it was easily a 500 to 700 person room, and it was full. And I was able to tell a story about a particular student um, that I had worked with from the time he was in 2nd grade to 8th grade, and then he went on to high school. But it wasn't just about like student leadership. We have all these different groups in our school. It was about finding leadership in the children in the places where you would least expect it, especially when we talk about our students with challenging behaviors. Sometimes we don't always see them as leaders, or sometimes the behavior presents differently to us that we sometimes can't look past that. And so that's what I talked about and told his story, and how just looking at his leadership skills and cultivating those leadership skills, he was able to be successful. He went on, he's doing really great things. But my big mic drop was that you need to look for those hidden leadership skills, because you never know who you'll be able to empower. And that was an opening experience for me, because once again, you said earlier in the episode that some of the statements that we make, we don't necessarily see them as bold. However, to somebody in that audience, they needed to hear that. And I think that's sometimes something that I take for granted as a speaker and somebody who has an audience, is that there are people who need to hear these messages. They're not common knowledge. The things that we talk about and the things that we do, we are there's a reason why we're called to do certain things, or there's a reason why I got that phone call. And it's so funny that you have the alchemist, you call your audience the alchemist, because it's like, if you reference the book, these are all like positive omens, the different things that we're supposed to do on our path in the universe. But it was a really great experience, and I'm glad that I was able to do it.
The mic drop moment, it's a powerful statement as well. And what a cool experience. I'm glad you got to do it. That's so exciting. Now, I'm wondering if this is different from your mic drop moment, but what are you hoping
Mhm.
people action in their lives tomorrow from your message?
What I am hoping that people get from this message is that one, it's okay to make mistakes. With taking risks and implementing the change process, there's no perfect way to do anything. And I think as educators and as people who are perfectionists in a lot of ways, they may think that a misstep is the end of the world. And it's usually not. It's another opportunity for growth and an opportunity to see things differently and to look at your path. So that's one thing. What I also hope is that the individuals listening to this podcast, they hear about working together and working as a team is critically important to the success in the work that we do on a daily basis. And they need to rely on their teams more. I know as principals, I know my personal growth area has been for a very long time delegation and not taking on everything. Our jobs are impossible, but they're possible through teamwork. And I think that's something that I really would like for people to take away with that you have really great staff in your building. You have people who are capable. You have people that have all these hidden talents that you did not know about. And it's our responsibility and duty to go out and find them and utilize their best talents to help propel your school forward.
100%. Now, what does your future look like?
Ooh, that's a good question. So it's so funny that you asked if I was published through Entry. It's so funny you asked that just because after that conference, I started writing a book again.
Good.
I actually stopped and started writing a book 3 times. And so after that, I was like, I need to begin writing. Becoming an author is a part of my future. Continuing to create content around the complexities of the work of the principalship and just through the lens of humor is something that I will continue to do and continuing to be a principal and help others. And I think there's a lot there, but the most exciting thing right now is writing.
I can't wait for that to come out. So please make sure that you're keeping us all updated. And I hope when we have you on another episode, this book is published and we can unpack it a bit for all of the alchemists here. How can our
Hopefully so,
listeners get in
yes.
touch with you if they have more questions?
Sure. I'm available on all social media platforms as does X and TikTok as principal underscore Mo. And my email address is pro3@gmail.com. And those are the best ways to get in contact with me.
All right, alchemists, thank you so much for collaborating with us on this episode and getting to be a part of a transformative experience through transformational leadership. Ashley, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to sit down and having a wonderful conversation with me. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me, Tyler.
You've been listening to the Elemental Educator. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, find us on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Elemental Educator.